thy infinite wisdom and providential goodness, has appointed the offices of rulers and councils for the welfare of man. We beseech thee, as behold with thy abundant favor us, thy servants, whom thou hast been pleased to call to the performance of such important trust in this our island. Let thy blessing descend upon us here in assembly gathered, and grant that we may, as in thy presence, treat and consider all matters that shall come under our deliberations in so just and faithful a manner as to promote thy honor and glory, and to advance the good of these whose interests thou hast committed to our charge. All which we seek in thy name, and for this sake of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. Amen. Please be seated.
Motion for the approval of the other paper as circulated.
Mr. President, I rise to move a motion for the approval of the order paper as circulated.
Mr. President, I rise to second the motion.
The question is that the motion for the approval of the order paper as circulated be approved. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Messages from the Deputy Governor General. Announcements by the President.
It is with regret that we do not have the Senator Senator Brandy Williams here this morning. She has informed me that due to illness, she is unable to be present, and we do wish her safe recovery from her slight illness. Thank you.
Papers to be laid. Statements by ministers.
Mr. President, I rise to make a few brief statements as per the order paper on the statements by ministers. And Mr. President, I want to, with your permission, of course, Mr. President, to read excerpt, Mr. President, from an article which was written in the Jamaica Observer, Tuesday, February 26, 2019. Mr. President, for your perusal, I want to give you a copy of such article. Mr. President, it relates to water and the water condition throughout the region. The article states, Mr. President, an article published by CMC, the Caribbean Media Corporation. Caribbean countries have been warned that the rainfall over the next 3 months may be drier than usual. In some islands, resulting in a progressively increase in wildfires. Mr. President, the article went on to state that the Barbados-based Caribbean Climate Outlook Forum, CARICOF, in its latest Caribbean Climate Outlooks, released here on Monday, this very week, said that with a weak El Niño condition forecast, changes of drought and recurrent dry spell in the second half of the dry seasons are increased, and heat waves will start occurring locally, Mr. President. Mr. President, the article went on also to state that the rainfall during the period of March to May be drier than usual in the ABC Islands, that is Aruba, Bonaire, and Curacao, also in Belize. But Mr. President, this is the part that should get our attention, also in the Lesser Antilles. Mr. President, the article also states that out of the 90 days in March, April, and May, there are about 15 to 30 wet days in those particular months, Mr. President. Mr. President, I have said all of that simply to say this, that we are already in the dry spell in the Leeward Islands, and in particular on the island of Nevis. And I want to use this forum, Mr. President, to encourage our people to conserve as much water as possible. It is no secret, Mr. President, that the rainfall pattern have changed, and it therefore behoves us to be more prudent in our use of water and in our efforts to conserve water. And while, Mr. President, we are seeking to conserve more water, it is also our quest to continue to seek for new water. And we are hoping, Mr. President, that in another day or two, we would have a report from Bede LLC, who were contracted to provide additional water on the island of Nevis, as to a number of possible sites where we can explore for additional water. Mr. President, we have been patient with this matter, and I'm hoping that we can see the drilling of and for additional water on the island of Nevis very shortly, Mr. President. But I wanted, Mr. President, to say to our people at this time to do their very best to conserve as much water as possible, Mr. President. Mr. President, I am also responsible for labor. And I'm happy to report, Mr. President, that on Monday of this week, we would have met with the management team of the Four Seasons Resort to seek further clarification, Mr. President, on the pending closure. Mr. President, the general public have been asking some questions. And one of the questions, Mr. President, that have been asked is about this 25% of workers' salary. And we have sought, Mr. President, to clarify that. The management of Four Seasons, Mr. President, would have reported that the 25% is 25% of their 40-hour per week salary. Let me state that again, their 40-hour per week salary. It does not necessarily include the service charge and those tips, but it's a fixed amount as it relates to their 40-hour per week salary, Mr. President. Well, Mr. President, I want to say to our people as well that while we prepare ourselves for this closure and the renovation of the Four Seasons, I look at it, Mr. President, as an opportunity for our people. It was revealed, Mr. President, in our discussion that quite a number of the workers at the Four Seasons have a lot of vacation time. A lot of vacation time. Mr. President, I want to suggest to our people to take their vacation time during this period of closure. Because here it is, Mr. President, they will not only be collecting their vacation pay, they will also be collecting 25% of their normal 40-hour per week salary. And I would believe that they would be getting some well-deserved rest, Mr. President, during this time. Your vacation pay, 25% and a vacation. What a good combination, Mr. President. So I want to encourage those workers who have that time, who have those many days of vacation time, to use them during this period. Mr. President, while we prepare for the closure and the pending reopening, it was also disclosed, Mr. President, that to date the Four Seasons is seeing some 6,000 room nights, Mr. President, in the new tourism season in 2020. Now, Mr. President, what that is saying is that when the hotel reopens after the renovation, things will be extra good for the Four Seasons and for the island of Nevis and for the workers. So, Mr. President, it therefore means that they would be working longer hours. They might be working a lot harder. So it is even more important for them, Mr. President, to take their vacation. So I want to encourage that, Mr. President. Mr. President, I want to very briefly give an update on a number of other projects that we are embarked on, and in particular, a number of road projects, Mr. President. We have completed, Mr. President, the initial phase of the Bath Village Rehabilitation Project from Reliable Motors to the bridge. And we are now continuing, Mr. President, that phase down to Miss Butler. And we are hoping, Mr. President, to have that phase completed very shortly. We are also, Mr. President, continuing in earnest the Brown Hill Rehabilitation Project. We have already put in place the alignment of the road, and we hope to commence clearing and construction in another week or so, Mr. President. We continue, Mr. President, the bypass road from Brown Hill to the Cherry Garden area. And that too, Mr. President, will be getting back up to speed in a very short time. Mr. President, we continue with our water enhancement project, especially in the Craddock Road area, in the Cades Bay area, and on that side of the island. We, Mr. President, have sought to wind down the CDB water enhancement project at the end of last year. But, Mr. President, due to some delays with land matters, especially in the Cades Bay area, we had a slight delay as it relates to going through persons' land and matters like that. We have sorted that out, Mr. President, and we should be back on track very quickly to have that part of the project completed. Mr. President, I am also pleased to inform the general public that the Physical Planning Department recently conducted an environmental impact assessment training session. And Mr. President, this is very important for the island of Nevis, because we have seen, Mr. President, quite a number of proposals coming before the Planning Department. And we want to ensure, Mr. President, that the assessment of these environmental impact assessment is done adequately, and the officers at the Physical Planning Department can make an informed decision and advise where necessary, where we can make improvement to those developments, Mr. President. This was a project, Mr. President, which was facilitated by Green Solutions International, SKN, and we saw persons from the Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Planning, the Water Department, the Environmental Health Department, the Housing, Nevis Housing and Land Development Corporation, Mr. President, and from the Ministry. It is critical, Mr. President. We also saw participants from NEVLEC also, Mr. President, because they too play an integral role in making a decision as it relates to project on the island of Nevis. Mr. President, I want to end my very brief statement by repeating where I started, to our people to kindly ensure that they do a greater job in conserving as much water as possible, Mr. President, because we are already in a dry season. May it please you.
Mr. President, I rise to make a brief statement with regards to some of the work that has been taking place in my ministry. And of course, I continue to say that my ministry is a ministry that takes care of all of our nationals and residents from the cradle to the grave, everyone. And part of the mantra and mandate of my ministry is to leave no one behind. We embrace everyone. And I commence this brief statement, Mr. President, in commending the work of the persons in my ministry. And just this past Friday, we had a very successful and very classy event at the Mount Nevis Hotel, where we would have had a small graduation ceremony for some teen mothers under a program called the Second Chance Teen Mothers Program. Of course, we know that there are various times when some of our teenagers become pregnant. And because they are pregnant, Mr. Speaker, we don't want to leave them behind. And so we've had this program that has been running for the past 6 years by the Social Services Department, and we had a graduation ceremony there because over the past years we have been embracing some of the teen mothers on the island from ages 12 to 21, equipping them with life skills. Some of them have even had a chance to sit subjects, overseas subjects, and for the past year they have been involved in some training and some skills training as well, which include things like hair braiding, manicure and pedicure procedures, culinary arts, makeup, art design, and hospitality. And what we're trying to do is that we're trying to get these mothers to be better parents. And at the same time as well, we're also equipping them with skills that they could become entrepreneurs and become more marketable. And I have to place on record, Mr. President, the gratitude of my ministry for UNICEF. UNICEF is an international organization that has seen the benefits of this program, and they have sponsored this program for the second time in a row. And so I really want to place on record the gratitude of my ministry for the assistance of UNICEF to this program. I am proud of the young ladies who are part of the program, who have embraced the program. I saw the glow on their faces, and once again I really want to commend the workers there, and in particular the director, Ms. Sandra Maynard, and the coordinator of the program, Ivosia Brown, because persons at social services work under very challenging circumstances. I'm aware that there are certain instances when they are actually threatened on the job, and so I really want to commend them, and I really want to commend this particular program and the efforts that we are trying to do in terms of moving our teen mothers forward in life. Mr. President, with respect to social services as well, we also have this Yes to Success program where we're trying to work with young people, and in particular at-risk young people as well. And I can report as well that very recently, earlier this month, we would have had a little session there at the Red Cross building, at the Credit Union building. We would have given them certificates in terms of completing certain programs. In terms of social services as well, Mr. President, of course we know that the Social Services Department run a seniors program that is second to none in the region, maybe in the world. And over the past years we have been honoring our seniors during Valentine, and we had a very successful event this past Valentine as well, something that the seniors have always looked forward to and have always welcomed. Mr. President, our young people in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, and in Nevis in particular we focus on, we know that there are various challenges with our young people. And unfortunately, we've had a lot of crime and violence, and we've had a lot of bad light being shone on our young people. But in our Department of Youth, Mr. President, we also want to shine the good light on the young people who are doing good things in our community and who are making a positive impact on our society. And the Department of Youth would have very recently, past week or so, launched an initiative called Impact 12, where we will be honoring one young person during every month for the next 12 months. And those young persons will be honored in certain themed areas, for example, in sports, entrepreneurship, in patriotism. And what we want to do is to highlight the work of these young people and have those young persons as ambassadors for the Department of Youth. Of course, if you're out there and you're listening and you're looking at this, sitting, you can nominate young persons for these awards, and you can get more information at the Department of Youth. And so I want to commend the Department of Youth on the launch of this program, and I wish it success. And I want to, in advance, congratulate all the young persons who will be honored in this initiative. Mr. President, I also want to continue to commend the work of the NTV. Of course, we are beaming all around the world because of the work that is being done, the tremendous work that is being done. And because of the tremendous work that the NTV continues to do, the Department of Information continues to do, they would have had a week of activities from the ending of January to the beginning of February. And of course, to let members of the public know more about the workings of the NTV and to encourage other young persons as well to get involved. Mr. President, in the area of culture, I am pleased to report that the Ministry of Culture and the Culturama Secretariat would have hosted 3 consultations. I know I would have spoken about these consultations right here at this podium, Mr. President. It was a promise, and it was a promise kept. Culturama, of course, is a government-run festival. And we believe that the people of Nevis have a right to have a say in the runnings of the festival. And so this initiative, the very first time it has happened, I'm very proud to say it was the first time that we have hosted such consultations to garner the recommendations and the suggestions and the views of members of the public. Because, Mr. President, I think all of us would know that after every festival, there's a lot of chatter around the island as to what went wrong and what went right and what we could do better. And so we would have gone out there to the public to get their views, to garner their suggestions and ideas. We would have had the consultations at the Pond Hill Community Center, at the Franklin Brown Community Center, and we concluded at the Red Cross building in Charlestown. I want to thank those persons who participated. We had some wonderful ideas, and we are looking forward to incorporate those ideas into making the 45th edition of Culturama the greatest and the best ever. And let me just once again, as I would have done last year, encourage persons on Nevis, as well as our nationals overseas and friends, to make this one another homecoming. We want to invite all of you who are overseas to start making your plans, start making your bookings, to be here for what promises to be the biggest and best Culturama ever. And of course, I would encourage persons here on Nevis as well, and not only to come and support, but we want you to be a part of the festival. And I will climax my brief statement, Mr. President, in just informing members of the public that the slogan for Culturama has been selected. And for those who are not yet aware of what the slogan is, it is love, passion, pride, Culturama 45. It was penned by a Brown Hill resident in the person, a Brown Hill resident. I know the Premier will be happy to hear this. It was penned by a Brown Hill resident in the person of Vernon Williams. And let me take this opportunity to congratulate her again. And Miss Williams will be getting a cash prize of $500, the first time that a slogan winner will be getting a cash prize. She will also be getting a plaque, 2 season tickets, as well as sponsorship for the troupe that she wants to enter for Culturama 45. And so, let us all, as citizens and residents, whether you are living in Nevis or in the diaspora, let us all have that love, passion, and pride, and be a part of Culturama 45. May it please you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, I rise to make a brief comment statement at this point in time, and I'll try and be as brief as possible, but it would have been remiss of me if I were to let this opportunity pass in not saying something here this morning. But I'm going to stick to agriculture this morning, Mr. President. You know, among all of the various ministries, portfolios that fall under my responsibility, agriculture, perhaps I would say, is one of the key or main portfolios that sometimes is overlooked by some of us, and sometimes is not given the full attention that it should get. But Mr. President, this morning I want to just go back to January 21st of this year, when we convened a forum at the NIPAC, the Nevis Performing Arts Center, a forum which was dubbed Agenda 2019. The theme for that forum was securing the food and nutritional needs of our island. It was a forum that was put together by the Ministry and Department of Agriculture, along with our stakeholders, ICA, CARDI, the Republic of China, Taiwan, sorry. And the whole emphasis behind this particular forum was to chart the way forward, somewhat to gauge where we are, or where we have come from, where we are, and where we are headed. And I believe the forum would have met its objectives. We are yet to report, because the report and the data that we're putting together will be circulated to all of the, well, to the Nevisian public, of course. It will be available to everyone. So that is being worked on. But coming out of that particular forum, I would want to talk about something that was once a key committee in the department, our Ministry and Department of Agriculture, which was the Agriculture Advisory Council. I believe the minister spoke, I remember for Nevis 3 who spoke prior to me. He was the past permanent secretary of the Ministry and Department of Agriculture. He may be familiar with this particular advisory council. If not, then of course he may have heard of it. But during the time we were together, we were not able to get this committee up and running. But it was in existence prior to me, prior to 2013, when I became the Minister of Agriculture. For some reason, it became dormant. And through the efforts of the permanent secretary, the current permanent secretary, myself, the director, and all of the stakeholders who have an interest in the well-being of agriculture here on the island of Nevis, we were able to put this committee or this council back together again. Now I just want to explain briefly what this council is about, the makeup of the council, and the mandate that this council has. Now the council was established out of Agenda 2019, like I said, that forum that we had back in January. And its goal, more or less, is to provide a goal, provide the benchmark and the pathway, like I said before, of the department and agriculture on a whole, or the sector on a whole here on the island of Nevis. Now, this would not just be for the next calendar year, but for years to come. Because you see, coming out of this council, at the first meeting that we held, we realized there are various challenges that the sector faces. And these challenges cannot be overcome or faced just primarily by the department or ministry, but it would need that relationship with all of our stakeholders, agriculture enthusiasts, farmers, ICA, CARDI, all of the necessary stakeholders who normally play a role in some of the activities that we have at the department and at the ministry. The council members, as we have it thus far, includes, but certainly wouldn't be limited to, the minister himself, which is myself. Of course, if someday I am not the Minister of Agriculture, it means then whomever the minister is at that point in time would assume the chair of this particular council. Of course, the permanent secretary in the Ministry and Department of Agriculture, Mr. Huey Sargent, he's a member. Randy Elliott, who is the director. Also Floyd Libert, who is the assistant director. Mr. Steve Reed, who is the acting chief extension officer. Augustine Merchant, who is currently the ICA rep for the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. Christian Fleming, who is the CARDI rep, who is based in St. Kitts. Also, Mrs. Catherine Forbes, who is the director of the small, or SIDU, Small Enterprise Development Unit. Mr. McClevin Truss, who is a budding farmer and an aggressive farmer here on the island of Nevis. And also Donald Daniel, who is a seasoned farmer. He is a part of that council as well. 10 members for the time being. But we intend to meet quarterly, Mr. President, and we had our first meeting on I believe it was the 5th of February. Coming out of those meetings, like I said, back on the 5th of February, we would have established quite a number of challenges and charted a way forward. First of all, let me say we realize that it is a difficult issue that we have had to deal with and grapple with over the years, and that is the actual marketing of the products that are produced here on the island of Nevis. Those who have been around long enough and who have been familiar with the inner workings of the Department of Agriculture would know that there once existed or still exists, but it was a thriving relationship that was established way back in the early 1990s, I say somewhere around 1991, with the Four Seasons Resort, what we would have dubbed then the Nevis model, which would have garnered significant revenue for the Department of Agriculture and by extension the farmers here on the island of Nevis, because of course all of the products that were sold to Four Seasons at that time would have made their way through the marketing division, which forms part of the Department of Agriculture. And that division would have been the entity that interacted with the Four Seasons Resort and would have established what the demands are for the resort and provided necessary supplies. Now, coming out of the meeting, we would have also established at least 6 crops that we're going to focus on. And of course, this is from our end, but we also need to establish with Four Seasons and also the additional or the other hotels here on the island of Nevis. What are some of the demands that they have as well too, so that we are working in unison? And some of the crops that we intend to focus on, first of all, is sweet potatoes. We do believe, and I said it back in December, that we do believe that sweet potato is a versatile crop, and it can certainly provide a name for the island of Nevis in terms of one of those products that could form part of every meal that is produced, local meal that is produced and provided to our visitors and also our local residents as well. So the sweet potato is one of those crops. Tomatoes, peppers, which are sweet, and also colored peppers as well. Melons, lettuce, pumpkin. Those 6 crops we believe are 6 crops that can be grown here and grown in the quantities that can supply, if not supply in terms of shutting out the import of those products, but we can produce at a percentage or level that we believe can supply most, if not all, of the hotels here on the island of Nevis, and of course meeting the local demands as well. We also realize that the collection of data is important to provide us with a clear picture as to what we are producing, whether we are doing it well, or whether we need to improve, or whether we need to abandon certain products that we sometimes produce here on the island of Nevis. I want to point out to you, Mr. President, based on data, I was able to do some quick research and realize that once you focus on the data that you're provided with, or you can put your hands on, it certainly can be appealing to you to know that we have done an excellent job in the past in the production of various crops here on the island of Nevis, and also meat products as well. Between 1991 and let's say 1993, I just picked up those couple of years, 1991, 92, 93, and based on just these few commodities, pork, mutton, beef, eggs, we were able to move from just about $169,000 worth of sales to Four Seasons to, by 1993, over $263,000 worth of sales in those particular commodities. But if I were to go further, it suggests to me that we would have done much better in years thereafter. Up to 1997, for example, we were doing almost $500,000 worth of sales in our meat products and crop products to the Four Seasons Resort, in excess of $500,000 worth of sales. But we had a significant fall off. Perhaps there are various reasons why, I'm sure. Because of course, as personnel changes, whether in the department, whether at Four Seasons, then the focus would have changed over the years as well. Well, we are saying that we need to refocus and understand that there is huge potential to begin. Now, the minister, the member for Nevis, one would have indicated that there is a tremendous amount of persons who we expect to visit the Four Seasons after the renovation process is done. I believe he said in excess of 6,000 bed nights. Now these persons have to eat when they come here. And I just highlighted that, Mr. President, because if you were to look throughout the whole entire island of Nevis, not only hotels, but we have a thriving sector as well. That is the villa and condo sector. I call it that because without a better name tag to give to it, there are a lot of persons who spend up in excess of 3 weeks in those particular villas and condos who have to eat. And when they come here and we promote this whole thing about eating local, we don't want it to just be cliche to say eat local or buy local and eat local. We want it to be a fact that people come here and savor our local products and produce. And that is why I'm saying, when I look at these data and these numbers, it tells me that we had something good going in the past and we need to get it back on track. And it would start with us at this particular level, the council level, laying out to our farmers, selecting farmers who are willing to come on board and who are willing to buy into this particular move that we are on again, to ensure that we are producing what we can produce, what we are capable of producing, and what I do believe that our visitors and locals will be proud of. Mr. President, this council, you'll hear more about it. Like I said, it would be a quarterly, we'll be meeting quarterly. But out of that, we'll make reference to it as we go along from time to time. As a matter of fact, if I were to go further and just say that a lot of produce are imported into the island of Nevis, what I have realized when it comes to importation, if I were to start with establishing a relationship with a supplier in Miami, for example, start to buy tomatoes. By the time you know it, within a few months, they're already selling me cucumbers. They're already selling me cabbages, because that's what suppliers will do. Once you start buying one thing, they'll start to sell other things to you. And then, of course, that will be to our detriment. So that is why I'm saying we have to increase our production here so that our local purchasers or supermarkets or local residents can know that these things are available here, and not that we are subjected to an outside entity who would have all of these things to throw at us. So it is something that we have to pay special attention to. Of course, the challenges are there, and we have established what some of the challenges are. We have the challenges of predial larceny, which is persons going out there and lifting things that do not belong to them. They haven't put in the effort to cultivate these products or produce, but they intend to go and lift it and come back and sell to our local persons. But they don't own a farm. So we have to find ways and means to curtail that, Mr. President. We have difficulties with the monkeys, of course, but we have been introducing various techniques here on the island of Nevis to deal with that. Of course, climate change is a huge factor. You heard the member for Nevis 1, he spoke just now about the difficulties with water. But of course, we are doing from a government standpoint what is necessary to ensure that we have some supply of water to our farmers here on the island of Nevis. So we are continuing that trend in terms of developing wells that will be utilized by our farmers. Of course, crop scheduling is a huge factor to consider, because we don't want to have a glut on the market this month and the next month you don't see that product at all. So those things that I'm laying out here are the areas that we intend to sit down, hammer out, and sit with our farmers, who are our the most important stakeholder that we have, our farmers, because unless they are producing, there's nothing that will be available to us. Well, of course, we have been addressing the land availability factors that we have here on Nevis. We have since gone about offering land tenures to our farmers, 5-year leases, and of course those will be increased once farmers have proven to us that they are willing to bend their backs, do the work, and produce to the level that we know they are capable of. So all those issues will be addressed as we go along, Mr. President. I know this is just statement by ministers, it's not a budget address, so I have to be careful. But quickly, Mr. President, before I take my leave, let me just promote quickly this huge event that is the signature event of the Ministry and Department of Agriculture, which is called Agriculture Open Day. It will be hosted at a new location, they say, which is the E.T. Willett Park. I spoke about it before, but every opportunity I get, I'll speak about it, because this is the 25th anniversary. And for a 25th anniversary, you must be able to showcase something that is different to the previous 25. It must be different. And this year is going to be, or the previous 24. Well, at least you're listening. That is good. So, which is different to the previous 24. Excuse my voice as well, Mr. President. But we're going to be having that event at the E.T. Willett Park. The committee has met on numerous occasions, and they've provided me with their reports as to how they're progressing. And I'm going to tell you this, Mr. President, without getting into details here. I think the Nevisian public, the Kiddishan public, and those who are going to come from Statia or St. Eustatius, those who are going to come from the U.S. Virgin Islands, British Virgin Islands, the entire Caribbean, they're going to be in for a treat this year. 2 days of fun and frolic and exhibition. But the details will be known, because we're going to ramp up our PR over the next couple of days and weeks, so that the Nevisian public will be sensitized to this particular event. We are hoping that on those 2 days, our young men and young women will be exposed to all things agriculture. We want to make sure that when we come out of this particular event, agriculture would be on the lips, on the tongues, and everywhere here on the island of Nevis. It is one of those events. You hear I'm talking about it? The member for Nevis 3 before spoke so glowingly about Culture 45. It is months away. But you hear how we sound? Sound like it's tomorrow. I want Agriculture Open Day, which is just weeks away, to sound like it is a day away. So I want persons to get ready for a huge event. It will be Thursday, March 28th, and Friday, March 29th. And then on the 30th, we have an event for all of those persons who would have contributed to the success of agriculture over these years. Not just the 25, but over the years. So that event would be known to those who would be invited accordingly. Yeah? So, Mr. President, I want to leave it there for now, but I just wanted to impart those few words as is stated on the order paper, statement of ministers. I may have gone a bit longer than I should, but I will wrap up now. May it please you, Mr. President.
Personal explanations. Introduction of bill and first reading.
Good morning, Mr. President. Unlike my colleagues, I have not taken the opportunity to make a statement, and I would rather indicate that, of course, tomorrow I will have my monthly press conference and would interact with the members of the media then. Mr. President, I rise to have read a first time the bill shortly entitled the Nevis International Exempt Trust Ordinance 2019. And whilst I appreciate this is not the opportunity for the debate, I wanted on the introduction of the bill for first reading to indicate that the reason for us coming for first reading only today is to make this bill, shortly entitled the Nevis International Exempt Trust Ordinance 2019, available to the public and to the opposition for comment. The bill seeks to repeal and replace in its entirety the Nevis International Exempt Trust Ordinance, Chapter 7.03, the law which has been enforced, Mr. President, since 1994, and to introduce several substantive amendments making provision for law relating to international trusts, qualified foreign trusts, and for matters incidental thereto or connected therewith. This new ordinance will also seek to update and modernize the legislation in keeping with international trends and standards in the financial services industry. The government, in exercising its prerogative in laying the bill for the first reading, is seeking to allow and facilitate the widest possible public comment within the parliamentary legislative process. It's an example of good governance at work, Mr. President, something we promised. And the period between the first and the second reading, we hope to come back on a future occasion, will allow those interested, particularly those in the financial services industry, to review, consider the bill, consider the implications, and make their comments. Too often, we hear from those directly affected by legislation that they didn't know, they didn't get an opportunity to consider, they weren't aware. And so I'm sending a clarion call this morning to say to those, particularly in the financial services sector, that this bill, shortly entitled the Nevis International Exempt Trust Ordinance 2019, is being laid in the House for first reading, and we're encouraging one and all to make their comments and to consider the implications of this very important bit of legislation. Mr. President, I will not tarry because I know it is unusual to make lengthy statements at this stage, but I just wanted to make that plain and encourage those listening to really have a look. This is a central piece of legislation for our financial services sector, and we have had, of course, a bit of legislation since 1994. We have tweaked it, we've amended it, now we're talking about repealing it altogether, and so this is very important that those affected have a look and make their input. We look forward to those comments, to taking them on board, and for them to influence the final bill that we hope will be passed by this Honourable House. And so at this juncture, I therefore move the first reading of the Nevis International Exempt Trust Ordinance 2019.
Why I asked that question, sir, I do believe he could have made an announcement. He could have called the practitioners together. He could have done He could have done it in so many different ways, rather than come to Parliament and make a presentation on the first reading.
Mr. President, insofar as the comment from the honourable member opposite is directed to me, I do not believe it was a long statement. I think that characterization I would take issue with. I think all that I'm seeking to do is to put it in context. I have not got, and nor have I said a single word about the content of the bill. All that I'm asking, and in response, I think that my comment, unusual as it might have been, that I took not the usual 30 seconds, but perhaps 2 minutes, is because we have been recently engaging with the financial services sector. And time again, we get the sense from them that they were not consulted or they were not aware. And so I'm simply trying, for this first reading, to make it plain to all, the House and to the public, and specifically to those in the sector, that we are seeking to have them involved. And so by putting it here for the first reading, we want their consultation, we want their input, and that is all. So it might be unusual, but I don't think it is forbidden under the rules.
Mr. President, I now have come to the conclusion that we have the necessary expertise within the government itself to do a trust act. It seems to me in the past that we often sought advice of the practitioners and people like those before we came to Parliament, even for the first reading.
It's not my intention to make any comment on what has been said. Yes, it is true that we don't normally explain the first reading at this stage, but the member did say that it was not the norm, and I could accept that, and I have accepted that. And so as far as what was said is concerned, that is fine. Could we have a seconder for that reading, please?
Mr. President, I rise to second the motion for the first reading of the bill shortly entitled the Nevis International Exempt Trust Ordinance 2019.
The question is that the bill shortly entitled the Nevis International Exempt Trust Ordinance be read the first time. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
A bill to repeal and replace the Nevis International Exempt Trust Ordinance, Cap 7.03N bracket, with the Nevis International Trust Ordinance 2019, to make provisions for the law relating to international trusts for the matters incidental thereto or connected therewith.
Bill has been read the first time.
Adjournment.
Mr. Speaker, I rise on the adjournment. Mr. President, forgive me. Mr. President, I rise on the adjournment to, of course, thank the House and thank the members who have come. This is an ongoing commitment that we have made to have the House convene at least once every 2 months. And it is a commitment that we feel is important enough that, notwithstanding today I believe is the last day of the month, we have decided to come not having met. So this is the first session. It is customary on an adjournment for us to make statements which are non-controversial. And I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate the people of the British Virgin Islands for having gone to the polls in the last few days and for electing a brand new government. And to in particular congratulate Andrew Foy, who I gather is now the leader-elect, Premier-elect, I believe he is referred to, in the British Virgin Islands. Many of our people, Mr. President, live in the Virgin Islands. Many call the Virgin Islands home. In fact, our own legal advisor who's here with us, I believe, has at some point called it home, although she has now abandoned that, I hope, for the fairer climes of Nevis. But our people are there in large numbers, and I know that our people, wherever they are, involve themselves in the process. And I would want to extend my congratulations to Mr. Foy. His party is called the VIP Party, and I wouldn't talk about what their color is, but it isn't blue. And I'm hopeful that they will see it fit to change that color to blue in the future. But they have done well. I want to congratulate them. At the same time, I want to commiserate with my dear friend, Mr. Myron Walwyn, because he's of Nevision extract, of course. I consider him a Nevision, and he was the man tipped to be the next premier if he had been successful. Regrettably, he was not. I'm told he even lost his seat. But Myron is a good guy, and if he's hearing me, I want to say to Myron that I wish you all the very best for the future. Politics is, as we know it is, the ebbs and flows, ups and downs. And I'm really proud of the process that we saw there and the rapidity with which they were able to come back with their results and the peace and order. It demonstrates, Mr. President, that democracy is really alive and well in our region. And I think a lot of times we take it for granted. But democracy is alive and well in our region. We have seen elections elsewhere where sometimes days and weeks after we can't find out who has won, and which are beset by violence and widespread allegations of problematic voting and the like. The truth be told, that while we've had our own problems, the region, BVI, St. Kitts, Nevis, and elsewhere, we have had always peaceful, fair, and free elections in the main. And I think we ought to be congratulated for that. And so I use this opportunity merely to extend congratulations to the government, the new government, and people of the British Virgin Islands, our sister territory, and one with which we have a very close familial bond. And so I extend my congratulations to them accordingly. Thank you, Mr. President.
The only problem with them, the grief, Mr. President, I rise to speak on the adjournment as well. And I must say, first of all, and I don't intend to be controversial, but I must say that this meeting is exceedingly short. And I would advise the government that it's not always important to meet every 2 months if you have no reason to meet. I suggest that this morning's meeting was one more of duty rather than of substance. And we should take note of that and make sure that we use our time more wisely in the future. Albeit you met on the last day of February. That is of no significance to me, and I'm sure of the people of Nevis, because they must be wondering what was going on this morning. I would want to join with him in congratulating the people of the Virgin Islands on the election and their peaceful election. I've followed the elections in the Virgin Islands for a number of years, seen that my daughter actually lived there for a few years and worked there for a few years. And I could regard myself as a friend of the former Premier, Mr. Smith. Mariner, I think I met once or twice, but I can't claim to know him very well. And I seem to remember that his party came in on the wings of serious corruption in government in the Virgin Islands, especially in the Ministry of Communications. Well, as it is, as time passes and memories fade, things change and people have hope for new things. And I understand that they were criticized for not actually responding well after the last hurricane. These things happen in politics, and the electorate is always hopeful that better things will come along. I must also note, Mr. President, there is a strange coincidence that places like the British Virgin Islands and Bermuda and Montserrat and Anguilla seem to have more peaceful elections than the rest of us. And I've asked myself, what is the cause for the coincidence? And ironically, Mr. President, it seems to me those of us who remain under the British flag, not the Queen, but the British flag, in terms of Parliament, tend to have fairer and more easily useful elections than those of us who claim to be independent. That is something that we need to ask several questions about, because it does not reflect well on the development and maturity of us as a Caribbean people. Having made that point, Mr. President, let me say that I do hope that in the future, even as we have exchanges, that democracy will prevail, since it seems to me that democracy is under threat in the North, although people don't seem to want to say it. And we tend to follow the direction of the North. I would want us to be an example, since my understanding is that we had a Parliament and a House of Assembly before the United States of America, although the color was different in those days than now. In conclusion, I want to congratulate the new leader and Premier of the BVI, and I do hope that the people of the BVI will enjoy some peace, some freedom from natural ravages, and that those little islands will continue to develop. Yes, our people are there, our people have benefited, and Nevis has benefited as well, because many of our present contractors hone their craft in the British Virgin Islands and the US Virgin Islands. Mr. President, so please you.
Okay, let me put my piece in at this point in time. The Speaker for the House of Montserrat, Mrs. Shirley Osborne, has communicated a correspondence seeking the assistance of the Nevis Island Assembly to assist them with their youth parliament this weekend. And so the approval was given for both Ms. Williams and I to go to Montserrat to assist them. As is known, the Commonwealth Day is the 11th of March, and on that day, here in Nevis, we would be having our youth parliament. The students are presently, some 40 students are presently getting their facts together on a white paper that has been circulated relating to the national insurance, healthcare and national insurance. And at this juncture, I wish to invite all present to the Parliament on the 11th of March to witness what I think would be an exciting time. So with that in mind, I hereby declare that the adjournment be approved.
Mr. President, I rise and seek your leave to have this Honorable House adjourn sine die.
Mr. President, I rise to second the motion.
Question is that this Honorable House be adjourned sine die. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. House adjourned.